Good morning. You listen to FloorDaily.net, and I'm Kemp Harr. This morning, my guest is Bruce Zwicker, the former CEO at Haines and a strategic thinker in the business. Bruce, how you doing?
I'm great, Kemp. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to spend time with you. We've talked a couple times lately. It's because you've been traveling lately, and I'd appreciate it if you'd be my correspondent for this recent Domotex Asia show and tell our listeners a little bit about that show. It was last week. You got back toward the tail end, and I've let you acclimate and get your time zone right. How does that Asia show compare to the German show?
They're similar in size, and they both have about 13 different buildings, very large buildings.
Yeah.
And the square footage of the Shanghai show is bigger than Hanover by some degree. I don't know how much.
Yeah.
And I'd say the number of people might be close to the same, but I haven't seen the numbers. But both of them are really large, totally focused on floor covering, unlike our surfaces show.
Yeah.
They're both very impressive. I'd say that both shows are 60, 65, maybe 70% either European or China in the case of Shanghai, and then the other 30, 35% is more international. I'd say they're pretty similar. They're both, of course, run by Domotex, or both have the name Domotex, and I learned a lot at both. But the Chinese show, I have to say, my eyes were really open as it relates to the LVT, multi-layer, rigid core, whatever you want to call it, product category, and also seeing what they can do in the wood business. Yeah. So it was eye-opening.
All right, let's get into that in just 1 second. Just a couple more questions on the show.
Sure.
Some people say that the Germany show is a definite global show. With the location of Domotex Asia in Shanghai there, which is a major city right there in the middle of the coast of China, that it's kind of more of a regional show. Would you say that or not?
I would say yes. I would say that the Shanghai show is a bit more regional than the Hanover show. The Hanover show is international, particularly as it relates to the rug business and the carpet business. Those are much bigger over there, and so maybe that's why it's more international. It's a little hard to say, but in general, yes, it's more international in Hanover than Shanghai. Both of them have a fairly local flavor as well.
And let me tell you another thing. I go every year to Germany, and I only go every third or fourth year to Shanghai, and there's kind of a reason for it. And it's the tone. The tone of the German show, it's less intense. It's more of a, let me show you what we got. Let's share information, that kind of thing. When you go to that Asia show, I'm telling you, it's intense. It's competitive. There's guards at some of the booths to make sure that competition doesn't come in. So did you notice that?
A little bit. And I would say it maybe has a bit more of an edge on it. Yeah. I wouldn't say it was quite as pronounced as you experienced it, at least not this past show.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say it has a bit more of an edge.
Well, it's changed, and I may go next year. So one of the other things, I've talked to some other people that went, and they were kind of surprised because they thought it was going to be business as usual, especially in the LVT category. And yet, and this is part of what I'm talking about, hey, there's a surprise. Look what's outside. There's this huge exhibit area outside in a tent, and it's anybody and everybody anywhere in China that's making LVT or some of the rigid core cousins. So that was kind of a surprise, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, exactly. There were two big tents, actually. It was really funny. I was watching a woman who was standing outside the sidewalk, and this is cold and wet there, and she's got samples in her hands, and she's hawking them like someone on Times Square selling, real fake watches, right? It was incredible, the amount of energy and the amount of selling that was going on and the number of producers there. Yeah, it was very eye-opening.
Yeah, and what I'm being told is that some of these companies that were focusing on laminate several years ago, that are way back in the middle of mainland China in an almost agricultural based, they're converting their equipment and starting to make vinyl-topped, wood-looking faux flooring. Yeah.
Absolutely. I would agree.
All right. So what's going to happen, do you think? I mean, based on, one of the things that when you travel, it gives you an ability to kind of see the forest for the trees.
Right.
What do you think is going to happen with this overabundance of supply? And how's that going to affect us here in this country from your perspective?
You're speaking of the LVT and the multi-layer rigid core type products. Yeah. So as an aggregate, they're almost 10% of the market, approaching that, growing about 25% a year, and in some subcategories faster than that.
Right.
So it's hard to say that at that kind of growth rate that the amount of capacity that's being added will create a surplus and when it will happen. I mean, my personal opinion is that it doesn't happen anytime too soon. Mm-hmm. It could happen in the future, but I think it depends on what type of capacity. In other words, as the product continues to evolve, and man, is it evolving,
right,
some capacity is going to become in surplus. As the new product types come on, they're not going to be in surplus. And if you've got a press type of process, I mean, you can engineer it to put on multiple layers and keep evolving the product.
Right.
So sometimes you don't need new capacity to make new products. You just have to engineer the capacity you have, depending on what kind. So I think it's still a crapshoot as to what exactly will happen. And in some forms of the product will become in oversupply, but not all. And the product's going to continue to evolve, and it continues to be very broad in its applications, and that's a big difference between it and laminate, as an example. Everyone wonders whether this is going to be the next laminate. I don't think so, but we'll find out in the rearview mirror, I guess.
I guess so. But let's don't forget that we're adding capacity here in this country. So the Asians are converting laminate capacity to more LVT capacity. They're spending money over there, and we're spending money over here. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
Well, the only thing I would say about capacity is new capacity comes on usually later than it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that new capacity oftentimes reaches its nameplate because it's a lot harder to make these multi-layer floor coverings in LVT types than it appears to be. Not that I disagree with you.
Yeah.
I agree that there is that risk, but sometimes all the capacity is coming on doesn't really get into the market as fast or as much as it looks like it would.
Real quick before we run out of time, one other thing you did over in Asia is you came before, I guess, a government group and gave a presentation on the U.S. hardwood business. I thought that was real interesting. Just give us a quick highlight on that, if you would.
Yeah, so I was a lead delegate of an international group invited by the government to present to manufacturers, primarily wood manufacturers, in a region called Naxum. Naxum is like the Dalton of China, particularly when it comes to wood floor covering.
Yeah.
So China is like 35% of the whole world market. The U.S. is 21% in comparison.
Yeah.
And I saw some wood plants over there that were really terrific and others that just weren't ready for prime time.
Yeah.
But they're going through the same kind of thing. What should they be making? There's changes in the Chinese law regarding floor covering that affect their business as well.
Yeah.
So they're in a state of change over there. You know, they represent 62% of all the imports coming into the U.S. Domestic producers have reduced their capacity. So, I mean, net, they're here to stay. And I just try to send a message that if they're going to ship here, they need to be reliable, delivery, quality, and they have to adhere to their color standards, which apparently is a really big problem for purchasers of wood over here.
Because sometimes what you get from over there comes over here, and it doesn't exactly match what the consumer is looking for.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a huge problem.
Yeah, interesting. All right, great, Bruce. It's always good to catch up with you. Thanks for telling us what was going on in Shanghai with Domotex. Again, been talking to Bruce Zwicker, former CEO at Haines and strategic thinker in the business, and you've been listening to Kemp Harr and FloorDaily.net.